What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to XJW Diaries. My name is Justin. So today I have yet another special interview for you guys. As you noticed, I started this year off doing a lot of interviews. I have some solo stuff for you guys that's coming up too. But it's been really powerful to help other people to get their stories out there. And it just shows that when we combine our voices together, we really have some strength. And we're all saying the same thing. Jehovah's Witnesses always say, apostate, liars. Those two words go hand in hand for them. But as you can see with all these different interviews, people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences, and we're all having the same issues. We're all saying the same things about this organization. So you cannot coordinate a lie that well. There's just no way. And it's especially been really insightful and really just a privilege to help women to get their stories out there. Because we're coming from an organization where everybody was suppressed, but women were especially suppressed and silenced. So now that they're out on the outside, now they can speak freely and talk about things that they went through. Things that they went through when nobody else would listen to them. And that's kind of how the story will go today. This interview is with a really cool lady named Dena. She actually lives in Ecuador. And in her story, you will see how a woman was pushed again and again into marriages with spiritual men, men who were supposed to be exemplary. And when those marriages turned out bad, nobody came to help her. In this story, she also had her kids kidnapped. She had everything taken away from her. I'm sure there's many of you out there who can relate to that feeling of having everything taken away after leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. And that's what makes her story even more powerful, because after having everything taken away, she rebuilt herself. At the age of, I believe she said 38 years old, she rebuilt herself. And today, she lives in a place that many Jehovah's Witnesses would think is paradise. The background that you'll see in her interview, that's not a digital background. That's where she actually lives. She lives in what many Jehovah's Witnesses would picture in their mind as paradise. She's made paradise for herself. And not only that, she's helping other people to make paradise for herself. She's healed herself from all that trauma that she went through in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And now she's come out on the outside, rebuilt herself, bought this humongous property out in Ecuador, and now she runs a healing retreat right there on her property, helping other people to get through their trauma so they can live their best lives too. So, really interesting story. I hope you guys enjoy this interview. It is a longer one. I will tell you, for those of you that want a deeper conversation, for those of you that are ready to hear some deeper subjects, the last part of the interview, the last 30 to 45 minutes, that's definitely for you if you're ready for something deeper. It's not for everybody, but if you are one of those people that's ready to hear something a little deeper, something that doesn't really get brought up as much in XJW topics, that last part of the interview is for you. And she will be back on again at some point to talk about those subjects even more, to go even more in depth into those things. So without further ado, this is Dena's story. I really hope you guys enjoy this. Thank you so much, Dena, for coming onto the channel, being willing to tell your story. So as usual, I'll start with my first question of how did you get involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
It's genetic. I came from 5 generations of neck deep, as deep into the organization as you could possibly get. Every family member, as far back as I can remember, they've always been elders, Bethelites, pioneers, international branch work. So I was born into the religion, and I was born into it. So it wasn't by choice, it was by birth. It was my spiritual heritage. It was a gift. It was a divine gift to have the blessing of being born into the truth.
Oh, so that's what they tell us.
Well, you know what? I think it's important to say that because as an infant, that's truly what I thought. This was my
Hmm.
spiritual heritage. I mean, I totally, that's what they said, you're lucky because your great great grandparents were in the truth and everybody's in the truth. And so literally that I know of, I don't know any family members that had left the organization before I did.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so let's go into just growing up as a witness. How was that for you? Going to school, dealing with just being different. What was that like?
So, typical Jehovah's Witness, we were homeschooled, so that was not an issue. We lived in New York. We were about an hour away from Bethel, so I had constant exposure. We drove to Bethel. For a while, we were driving to Bethel to pick up literature once a month. I don't even know how many times we took tours and ate lunch with governing body members. Governing body and other high-ranking people at Bethel would come out and give special talks. They always gave the memorial talk. So I had a very strong influence with the powers that be. I got baptized. I think I was 10 when I got baptized, and I started pioneering right away. Stephen Lett conducted my first pioneer school. That was an interesting experience. Even at the age of 12, I kind of questioned his sanity, but thought it was a privilege nonetheless. So growing up, I always kind of felt like I was a weirdo. Probably that was because we weren't from New York. We were from the country. So when we'd moved to New York when I was about 9 or 10, I kind of didn't feel like I fit in with all the fancy, sophisticated, young people in the congregation. So my dad made a deal with me and said, "Hey, you know what? Try Spanish for a year. And if you don't like it, then we could see about putting you in public school so that you can have friends and stuff." So I did a foreign language congregation when I was 12 and I learned Spanish. And so that was pretty much my entire childhood, was giving Bible studies. I mean, I was the little white girl at 13 who spoke Spanish. So during those years of pioneering, I think I probably had an average of probably 25 Bible studies a week with Spanish-speaking people. And actually, that's probably one of the things I'm super grateful for, because that was a talent that's kind of always been a useful skill, something I'm super grateful for.
Wow. So, how did you end up getting baptized at 10 years old? Were you pressured into it? Was it your own choice?
My spiritual heritage. Hello. That was the earlier the better. What's the question? There is no wait. That's what we do. That's what we've all done. So,
Wow.
there was no, how is your relationship? How does this feel? Are you ready for this? No, hello, this is what you do. And this is a track. And, you're going to marry an elder and you're going to be a missionary and you've got all these lofty goals. And, education was never, ever discussed. In fact, it was, you probably won't even graduate high school anyway, or, you'll probably never get married anyway, or, why, just do house cleaning because nothing matters anyway. Armageddon's coming tomorrow. So it was all like these lofty spiritual goals, which I bought into 100%. I loved preaching. I loved giving people Bible studies. I mean, even at the age of 13, I helped a lot of people learn how to read. There's a brochure that we had that was teaching the alphabet. And, even if it was an adult, sometimes we do, the Bible story, my book of Bible stories, just because the vocabulary was easier. So, I mean, I felt like I loved that. I felt like I was helping people. And I think especially in the Spanish community, they're pretty spiritual minded anyway. So, I don't think I ever had a bad experience in service preaching. I loved it. And I thought that was what made Jehovah happy. Okay. So from there, so dating, growing up Jehovah's Witness, especially with a very concerned father. I had a very loving family, very loving family. I never had any sort of family type of issues. Just a very overly protective father who wouldn't let me speak to anyone of the opposite sex without listening in on the other line. So dating was completely, I remember being like 16, 15, 16, 17, you know, and I knew I had friends that would kind of start dating because of course there's a lot of pressure to get married too, because single sisters, you know, we're sort of useless without an elder husband to go along with it, you know? So as I was kind of getting towards that age, I just knew it was going to be a nightmare because I knew my dad was not going to let me speak to anybody. And he was in construction. So every summer he would kind of like apprentice young brothers, and kind of teach them the construction trade and everything like that. And he had been working with this brother for 3 or 4 or 5 years. He was at the time, I think he was 27 when I was 17. And he was looking for a wife. So he talked to my dad, and apparently they set the cards in motion. And one day I go to work with my dad because I helped the family business doing construction. I started doing construction part-time when I was probably also about 13 or 14. So one day I show up after service, and it's just me and this other brother alone. I was like, what the heck? This is super weird. And so the conversation pretty much went something like, hey, I've talked to your dad and I've told your dad that I want to marry you. And so that's why we're here. And we were literally married about 4 or 5 months later. I never spent any time alone with him. There was no affection, no hand holding, nothing at all that might have been even remotely inappropriate. And I just assumed that was because he was super spiritual, you know, and I don't have any dating experience or anything. So I just think this is how it's supposed to be. He was an elder. He was also serving in a Spanish congregation. He was a regular pioneer. He wanted to do he had already done international branch work and wanted to continue doing international construction work. So, hey, you know what? The resumes matched. So I got married. And that was the first disaster. I'm pretty sure, I'll just kind of fast forward through that. I'm pretty sure he was probably gay and didn't realize it, because there was a lot of different things that happened and he just was not interested in a female. Just put it that way. And on top of that, I had found out that he'd gone through some abuse in his family. And so they'd start telling me all of this stuff that had happened in his family after the fact. I'm like, man, I totally should have known that before. Hello, I wouldn't have married this person if I'd have known the mental health issues, the sexual abuse issues that were rampant in the family. And so when my sister-in-laws were telling me these things, I was like, we need to tell the elders, because that's Jehovah's way. The congregation needs to be kept clean. And the people who were doing these things were elders. And so the response I got was, no, it's already been taken care of. We can't say anything. So I, as slightly rebellious, I suppose, super rebellious for the background that I came up in, I went to the elders privately and I said, I don't know if you guys know this, but this and this and this is happening. And the answer I got was, the land that the Kingdom Hall is built on is probably worth millions of dollars, and he donated it. And they do a lot for the congregation. And so we're just going to, let Jehovah take care of things in his own time. And that just kind of was like, I can't, are you kidding me? That was not the kind of elder my dad or my uncles were. I mean, they were righteous men who wanted to make sure that the congregations were clean. And, so that was kind of like my first, what the heck? What do you mean we're not going to deal with any of this? This is serious major sins that we're ignoring. So that was kind of my first, I guess maybe awakenings might be the right word. So of course, that was obviously a completely miserable, very unhappy marriage. And it was highly, highly abusive, highly emotionally abusive, highly verbally abusive. And I'm young, so I tried to go to my dad. I tried to go to my uncles. I tried to go to the elders. And the answers that I got was, honey, everybody has problems. You need to keep it private. Just deal with it. Rely on Jehovah. Be a submissive wife. and with enough Holy Spirit, everything is fixable. They didn't even want to hear what was going on. And so finally the abuse, the emotional, verbal, physical abuse got to the point where I just decided that I was going to leave, even if that meant that I had to get disfellowshipped and come back, whatever it was. Somehow in my head, I was pretty sure I needed scriptural grounds for divorce. I could have just divorced him, but my head's still trying to do things the theocratic way, which is you can't get a divorce unless there's grounds. So I did. I went out and I got disfellowshipped. And so while I was out, I went through, because at that time I think I was probably about 20, 21-ish. First time on my own, and I'm out there, and I had tons of anger and resentment too, because when I left, it wasn't just leaving a bad marriage, it was leaving every human I knew, every human I loved, my entire family, my everything, my whole world. But it was a sacrifice that I knew I had to make for my own mental health. Okay, so I'm out, I'm disfellowshipped. And then, I have a boyfriend and I get pregnant. So the only thing that I could think of was how horrible it would be if my baby didn't have family, if she didn't have grandparents, because my family was really great when I was growing up. And I just couldn't imagine her not having aunts and uncles and cousins and brothers and sisters, brothers. And I mean, just the big family that I had, because my family was huge. I have 3 uncles that were just as close to me as they were my dad's too, and I couldn't imagine her not having that support structure. So I decided that I was just going to have to, marry the worldly guy so that everything's all clean, because I'm still doing things the righteous way, because I was not unbrainwashed yet. I was still completely trying to do everything the right way, the truth, the truth that I've been taught my whole life. So I went through the process of getting reinstated. That's probably a whole other episode, but so I did manage to get reinstated. I had 3 small kids, and with the second marriage, he's worldly, right? And there was all kinds of obvious religious issues, because when he meets me, I'm like fun disfellowshipped girl, and now I'm super spiritual girl, which are completely different people. So there was a lot of conflict there. And then we had the kids pretty quickly. I mean, they were like 3, 2, and 1. So that was a lot for him to handle. And in the end, he decided that he didn't want the religion. He didn't want anything to do with the religion for the most part. That was the biggest issue. And so he left. So we ended up filing for divorce. And so, you know what, that's great. Now I'm 20, 25, 26, something like that. Divorced twice, and I have 3 small kids. So that just puts me in a really great spiritual scenario. But, I've got these 3 little kids, and, my family is super, super, super supportive. I was also in a Spanish congregation when the babies were little, so they spoke fluent Spanish. And so one of the elders in my congregation was a circuit overseer, and he had a son who, coincidentally was looking for a wife. And so I get married the 3rd time, and this guy was 20 years older than me. So I think when we got married, I think I was 27 and he was like 46, almost 47. And he lived in a different state. So everything was done by phone. I think we had dinner in person. I think we had dinner like maybe 3 or 4 times. And so that was it. So now I'm married to a very spiritual brother with 3 very small children.
All right, so let's back up to your first marriage real quick, because
okay.
Now you've gotten into there's 3 marriages that you have been pushed into here.
Yes, let's go back to the first one.
So the first one, I mean, can you just go into, first of all,
More
just
details?
the age gap? I mean, you were only 17. Here you are being set up with this man who's much older. So what was like, especially being a woman in the organization? What was that like, having such an older husband?
I kind of feel like I was I was beyond my years. I feel like I was, actually, I don't feel like I ever really had a childhood. I was pioneering my entire childhood, and I'm helping adults, and I'm teaching people how to read. So I kind of think I just kind of blew past the whole be a kid and have fun part. That didn't happen at all. But, like I said, I still felt like I was doing everything that I was allowed to do as a woman. I was, the only thing I was really allowed to do being single was pioneer. And I was good at it. So, and I enjoyed it. But other than that, other than assembly interviews or anything like that, I didn't, up until that first marriage, I didn't really have a childhood, nor had I really experienced what it was like to be a woman in the organization because I wasn't a woman yet, maybe, or because I was under my father's roof, my father's household. And so it seemed normal to me. So, okay, so I get set up with this guy. It gets arranged behind my back. It was okay because I was actually really good friends with his younger sisters. We pioneered together. We'd really pioneered together. I mean, we'd spend 10 hours a day together. I thought we knew each other. I thought they told me everything. So we get married, and the day after, before we'd even gone on our honeymoon, my sister-in-laws, 3 of them, decide that they should tell me some family secrets, some things that now that I'm part of the family that I should probably know. So they start going into all the details about how their father, who was a regular pioneer and had been an elder for 40 plus years, sexually abused all of them. Their grandfather, who was also a regular pioneer, who had been, an elder for 60 plus years, abused his son and the grandkids. And I was like, what the heck? Why don't you think maybe you should have told me these things before? And then they had another brother. They had an older brother that I didn't really know that well. And he did not come to the wedding. And the reason why he didn't come is because he was suffering from multiple personality disorders and had such a horrible relationship with his father, obviously, now I know why, that he couldn't even be in the same state as his father due to the abuse, and mainly due to the abuse. So I'm like, how can we be best friends? How could we know each other all this time, and you're just barely telling me this stuff the day after I get married? And they were like, well, we told his ex-girlfriend and she broke it off. And we really wanted him to marry you. So we thought it would be best for you not to know. And I was like, thanks guys. Thanks a lot. So now I'm in this highly abusive family that has mental disorders because of the abuse. And what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to do? I was completely, I don't know what to do about this. And since I came from a family who, you have to report anything that you know, because that's how we keep the congregation clean. And that's what makes us different from the world, is that we don't allow things like this to happen. So I did go to the elders, without my husband knowing and without anybody knowing. I went to the elders and I said, I'm now privy to this information. And they knew, they had already known. And their response was, he had donated so much land and money, and he was very powerful and very influential. Like I said, we only lived about an hour and a half away from Bethel. So at that time, my father-in-law, they had hosted Franz. I mean, they hosted Schroeder. They hosted all the governing body. Very, very influential family. And so their sins got shoved under the carpet because it didn't matter. They had enough clout that they could cover over those things. So that was pretty traumatic, because I had spent my life in a sheltered enough environment that I really did think that the organization was always clean. And I didn't think that anything like that was happening, because it didn't happen to me. And so I just thought we were in Jehovah's house and that things like that didn't happen. So that was a tough one for me to deal with. And, you know, and then, so now I'm married, and this guy obviously doesn't have any interest in sex at all. So how could you not want to have sex with your brand new wife who's only barely 18? Obviously there's bigger issues there. He never even remotely broached any of those. I mean, that was a complete, we're not talking about anything topic. So we had only been married, I think, about 4 months. And because we were right there near Bethel, and because he knew everybody in Bethel, and because I had a great reputation, there's actually guidelines about if you're given an assignment to go to a foreign country or something like that, you have to be married at least 2 years. You should be at least 21. But because of our reputation, I got signed off on, and we were sent to Mexico when I was 18, and I think we'd only been married for about 4 months. So they sent us to Mexico for international branch work. Construction work is what we were doing. And so that was another experience for me, because I loved the work that we were doing, but at the same time, I'm now realizing I'm married to a crazy person. Probably has multiple personality disorder like his brother, because he was just weird. I mean, he'd be okay 1 second and then a completely different human just seconds later. You know, he'd go on Bethel camping trips with all the guys. Sisters weren't allowed, including me. So I don't know what happened on those camping trips. I know that one of those brothers was disfellowshipped for homosexuality several years later. So I don't know, that's on him. But at the time, that's what I'm like, this is my life. This is who I have to be married to. And at the same time, I think in retrospect, I did not think this at the time, but in looking back, I'm assuming that he obviously has his own trauma that he doesn't have the tools to heal, to deal with, whatever. I don't know if maybe in some way thinking that getting married might fix him. I think that was probably what his mentality might have been. Like I said, we never had any sort of these conversations because this was a long time ago, and I didn't have the words. I didn't have the psychology. I didn't have any sort of resources to be able to deal with this type of severe disorders, abuse, trauma, you know, and now I'm married to it. So I would guess that what happened in his mind is we get married and it doesn't fix how he feels. It doesn't change how he feels. And then I become the enemy. He was a horrifically abusive person, emotionally, verbally, mentally. He was a master manipulator, literally only happy if he could make me break down and cry. I mean, it was really bad. It got so bad. My breaking point was it was so abusive that I actually started having thoughts of murdering him. That sounds terrible, but it was really, really bad. And, you know, I can't get divorced because that's bad. So murder seemed like a good option. I don't know. But anyway, so once I realized that that's where my head was going, I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to get disfellowshipped. I'm going to leave this person. I'm going to get a divorce, because I can't live like this my entire life. I remember thinking about my mother-in-law at the time, who'd been married to my psycho father-in-law. And she just had like this look on her face all the time, like this dazed and confused. You know, he'd say something to her and she'd just be like, okay. And I think I felt like maybe that would end up happening to me, that I would lose my sense of humor. I would lose myself if I stayed. And so that's how I opted for the route of getting disfellowshipped so that I could get out of the marriage.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for going into that, because I know there's a lot. I mean, just the way that witnesses handle relationships and dating and marriage, I know for sure there are a lot of women out there who got pressured into a marriage Again, like you said, you didn't have the tools, you didn't have the psychology to even know how to begin to tackle the issues that you guys were having. So they're just suffering. They're stuck in a marriage and they're suffering. And again, the witnesses have they have this age gap thing that's pretty common, where you have a much younger woman marrying a much older man, who in normal society they'd be in much different places in their life.
Your parents would have a fit. Everybody would have a fit. Especially, or then even the shortness of the dating period. Most normal people don't want their kids to rush into anything. Time, make sure this is the right decision. How does it make you feel? How is, do you feel? Nah, no, none of that. Hurry up and get married so that you don't sin. He's got a great resume. You have a great resume. Done.
Jeez, yeah. And so now you have to do what some of these women opt to do, which is basically get disfellowshipped on purpose.
Yeah. Which I could have just filed for divorce, but whatever.
But in their line,
my brain is still trying to do things the right way. Okay, so now I'm married. I'm pregnant with my first baby, and I'm going to get reinstated. So this is also a part of the story that should be told because, so my dad and my two uncles, we were all in the same congregation. By this time we had left New York. We were in Colorado. They were all three elders, and I never lived under my dad's roof because when we had come back from Mexico, we had lived with my in-laws for a short period of time, and I was just like, hell no. Bye. I'm going to Colorado. If you want to come, that's fine. But I am not living with this crazy guy. He's like creeping in my windows at night, coming into the bathroom while I'm taking a shower. He's freaking wacko, man. So I'm like, I'm going to Colorado. My family's in Colorado. Come if you want. And so he did. So we're in Colorado. And so that's where I ended up getting a divorce. So technically I was a complete adult, separate, never lived in my dad's house in this congregation. I get disfellowshipped. I want to get reinstated. So I'm faithfully going to all the meetings while I'm going through domestic violence in my second marriage because of going back to the truth. I mean, this was the guy that burned literature on the doorstep. This was the guy that threw my clothes out of the house and said, pick your God or me. And you know what? Yay, Jehovah, I did it. That's the conditions that I was getting reinstated in. So I'd been going back to all of the meetings. I think it was probably coming up on the year mark. And my dad and uncles, my whole family, they were strict no contact. They might wink at me during the meeting or something, but they were strict no contact. So, but my dad did tell me, he says, it's probably time for you to write your letter of reinstatement if you're ready. And that was it. So I write this letter and I give it to the presiding overseer, the coordinator. I think he was still the presiding overseer at the time. I don't think they changed the terms. So I hand him my letter and he looks at it and he reads it and he goes, rips up the letter, throws it in the trash and says, go ask your dad and uncles why. So I'm highly confused. I'm just trying to do the right thing and get reinstated. My letter gets ripped up. So I talk to my dad and I said, Dad, why did he rip up my letter? I mean, and so my dad gets this devastated look on his face. And he says, he briefly doesn't divulge a whole lot, but I already kind of knew some of the details because I'd been in this congregation before. Basically, the presiding overseer was sinning. His wife was sinning. His 13-year-old daughter had 2 abortions, and he's still the presiding overseer. So my righteous father and my uncles, in a spirit of trying to keep the congregation clean, were trying to get him removed as an elder. And he didn't want to. Obviously, he didn't want to. And so he basically decided to use my reinstatement as a pawn to get my dad and uncles to step down from being elders, basically removing any sort of conflict so that he could keep his position in the congregation. So my dad says, just give us a little bit of time. The circuit overseer visit's coming up. We're going to see, what, maybe we can handle this. Just be patient, wait on Jehovah. You're doing the right thing. This isn't about you. And so I'm like, okay. So circuit overseer comes, nothing happens. I'm still no contact, I'm not getting updates about, what's going on or anything. So the circuit overseer comes, nothing happens. I write a second letter. I turn it into him. I never hear a peep, not an acknowledgement that I've given a second letter. Absolutely crickets. I might as well have said, hey, I'm Mickey Mouse in that letter for all they cared. Absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing. So my dad and my two uncles stepped down from being elders, and I get a phone call from the presiding overseer, and he says, we're reinstating you now. Don't worry about any technicalities, like maybe actually meeting with you to see if you're repentant or anything like that. It's pretty much just, okay, all right, you're reinstated now. Good to go.
Whoa. Whoa, yeah.
I was fuming. I mean, inside, I had already gone through the abusive first husband, and it was already traumatizing enough that I have to go back to the same freaking Kingdom Hall and watch that asshole give parts. And he's a horrible human. Now I have to get reinstated in the same hall while you blackmail my family to step down, who are good people. They're just trying to do the right thing. And my letter gets ripped. I'm still fuming on the inside. Just whatever. And, the advice from my family was just, Jehovah sees everything. Jehovah sees everything. Give it time. It catches up with everybody eventually. Just focus on you do the right thing. You do the right thing and let Jehovah take care of the details. But on the inside, man, I was fuming. It was extremely traumatizing. And I would just look at my little baby and just think, I'm doing this for you. I am doing this for you. I am doing this for you. And not even just real, because at this time I'm still really indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. It's the only thing I ever knew, And at the time I would think too, not only do I want her to have a family, but I might be willing to risk my own everlasting life, but I can't in good conscience as a good mother not teach my child who's also has this spiritual heritage. How can I not teach her about Jehovah too, So, okay. So then that's kind of the background story to that. So now I'm married to the third guy.
And then, okay. So then he was the one who was the circuit overseer's son. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Elder circuit overseer's son.
Jeez. Okay. So that's, I just had to get clarity on that because, wow. Just to hear that a person has had to go through 3 marriages without, that they're just getting pushed into,
Okay.
So.
Well, I look forward to tigers in the paradise, so I just got one in dog form. That's all.
There you go. And you already live in paradise. So. Every picture that they show, you live there. All right. So where does your story go from after the third marriage then?
So third marriage, he is also, go figure, an alcoholic. Okay, so we get married, move in. He's also in a Spanish congregation. So, we're serving in a Spanish congregation. Okay, so this is an important part of the story. The only decent thing about this guy is that he was into psychology. His business was life coaching, but it kind of started out like sales coaching. And so the tool that he used was called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And it's kind of like a brain hack. It's a brain hack to help you change states, emotional states, it's a healing tool. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. And at this point in my life, I had never had any sort of introduction to psychology, the mind-body connection, how emotions have to do with your physical health. This just opened up like this whole world of knowledge and possibility and everything to me. So that's where I started. That's why I became a master practitioner of NLP. At that time, I was also regular pioneering. I think by that time I was probably like 28 or 29, something like that. So a lot of our stuff was business coaching. But as soon as you go into the business coaching, how come you didn't make your sales goals? It's because you have personal issues, you have past issues, you have trauma, so what was supposed to be, business coaching was life coaching. It was helping people deal with their trauma, their past traumas, relationship issues. And funny enough, as life would have it, I was in Utah. So the vast majority of the clients were actually Mormon. And a lot of them were coming to me that their main traumas in life was that they had left the Mormon religion and trying to reconcile, so the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons is pretty different, but a lot of their structure is pretty similar. They're also a very cult-like religion. They excommunicate. They also control dating and what you wear. And, they're also a high control group. So when a Mormon tries to leave their religion, they've got a lot of trauma that they have to deal with too. I remember at one point I had a client who had been married for 28 years. He had had 5 kids with his wife. And the last kid turned 18 and he just was like, he's like, I'm gay. I have always been a gay man and I have lived this life. I tried to deal with it. I did my best and I'm done. I'm going to live an authentic life from now on. And as a Jehovah's Witness, coaching somebody through being homosexual and their relationship with Jehovah, I was totally walking on a line there because I wanted it. He was a human. And I wanted to help him, and I had an affection for him, and I was good. I was good at coaching. I don't know. Maybe it's a little vain to say that I was instrumental in jump starting his life, but I was that man's lifeline, and that was the most wonderful feeling to me. Now, at the same time, too, since this tool that I used covers a lot of health issues too. How your own mind and emotions and belief systems can make symptoms worse, can make illnesses appear, and by healing that emotional trauma, you can actually heal the disease itself. So I was working with some people and having like mind-blowing results with healing physical ailments just through this tool of the emotional healing and the emotional coaching. And so then the elders find out, and what I'm doing is demonic. I'm dabbling in hypnotism and I'm dealing with spiritism, and I'm like, that is absolutely not what I'm doing. That has nothing to do with what I'm doing. But that was their interpretation. So I think that at that point in my life, I think that's when I unlocked my healer. That's when I realized that, part of what made me a good pioneer, part of what made me a good Jehovah's Witness, I guess, was that I loved people. I loved helping people. And I thought helping them through the Bible was the right way. But then I had this tool and I was like, man, this is incredible. This is what Jehovah's going to use to bring us to perfection. Psychology and the power of our mind, our untapped resources inside. And I had to stop because according to the elders, what I was doing was demonic.
Yeah, just you saying that reminds me so much of what it's like to be a witness. How everything, if it doesn't fit into their box, it's got to be bad.
Yep.
Yeah, so I want to go deeper into the NLP stuff a little bit later on, but can you go into so now you're you're in the third marriage. So how did you end up actually going through the process of waking up and leaving the witnesses?
Okay, so from Utah, we moved as a family to the Dominican Republic to serve where the need is great. And that had always been kind of my life dream. I mean, my original time in Mexico was kind of traumatizing, but other than that, I loved it. You know, I'd been to a couple of other countries before, and I loved living outside of the US. I wanted my kids to have that experience. And, you know, since I had kids, I couldn't be a missionary, which had been my goal before. And so this was kind of like, it just filled in the gaps. So we're in the Dominican Republic. We were in the Dominican Republic for 4 years. Those were the most traumatizing years of the marriage because the alcohol went crazy. Then that really went crazy then. And he got his hands on prescription painkillers. And so between the alcohol and the painkillers, he was a violent alcoholic. And so finally the bruises could not be hidden. And so an elder said, he'd been publicly intoxicated before anyway. So another righteous brother in the organization, he's like, you know what, you need to report this. You need to say what's happening. And so I did. And he got publicly reproved, deleted as an elder and as a pioneer. And this was a man who thrives off of power, absolutely loves being the priest of his house, he would call himself. And so now he's devastated because all of his position and power had been removed from him. At this time, the kids were 14, 13, and 12. So that happened. It was announced. I was out of the house the next day. When I come back, all of his stuff is gone. He had cleared out the bank accounts, cleared out everything, deleted my business emails. At the time, I was doing some online work with our own business of like search engine optimization, stuff like that. He had deleted everything and basically abandoned me and 3 kids in a third world country. I don't have any money. He took everything. So at first I was going to stay there with the kids. I was just going to stay there. And I thought, I'm going to figure out how to make this work. But there were some other complications. And finally, a friend of mine just said, you know what, you're going to have to go back to the States. And, you know, you're probably going to be going through a divorce. You're going to have to go back to the States, reset yourself financially. You can always come back. Nothing's permanent. And at the same time, my family were not very supportive of any sort of separation or anything like that. Never mind, I didn't actually do anything. All I did was report. Actually, the bruises got noticed. I didn't even have to report anything. You know, I'm not sinning. I didn't do anything. I'm not doing anything at all. And my family's opinion was divorce is, well, and maybe, you know, I'll give them some credit. This was the 3rd divorce. So, you know, this might have been their way of saying you need to get your shit together and stop getting divorced constantly and just suck it up and be a good wife. But their opinion was, you know, you do not have scriptural grounds for divorce, so we're not supporting you in any way, shape, or form unless you go back to the marriage. Never mind the fact that this annoyed me to no end. I didn't do anything. I was doing everything right. I wasn't the one that left. I wasn't the one that's committed domestic violence. I'm not the alcoholic. Hello. But no, I'm the one that has to make it right. Well, I didn't. So I went to California. I had a friend in California. I started working. So I had been married to husband number 3 for 10 years. And in those 10 years, he's raising these stepkids. The biological father had only seen the kids twice. He had never paid child support. He owed a ridiculous amount of child support. But, you know, through my studies of psychology and everything like that, my belief was you shouldn't bash the biological parent. You know, the children are still related to this person, even if I think they're a jerk, but, you know, they're still the parent. So I'm there in California. I think I'd been there for about 3 months. And the kids' dad, the biological dad, calls me out of the blue and says, "Can I see the kids?" And I go, "Okay." You know, maybe he's matured. Maybe he's ready to be a dad, you know. Okay. So he takes the kids for a 2-week visit. and he kidnapped them. Then I find out after the fact that the stepdad, in an act of vindictiveness, I suppose because I ruined his life, he decides he's going to ruin mine. He called the kids' dad and said, I was mentally unstable. I am unable to take care of the kids. And if he has any love for his children whatsoever, he will take the kids because they're in danger with me. My hometown was in Colorado. That's where the ex-husband was. I was living in California. So when I got the divorce from the kids' dad, that was out of Colorado. Basically, this was a jurisdictional nightmare because I had only been in California like 3 months. So as soon as he says, I'm keeping the kids, they're never coming back. You're never going to see these kids again. I immediately tried to get legal help. Legally, he had up to 3 months of visitation. Never mind that he never used it before. He still legally had 3 months. So for 3 months, there was absolutely nothing that I could do. So in that time, I started working like 3 jobs, saving as much money as I could, trying to figure everything out. The legal advice was, this is a jurisdictional nightmare. You're not a legal resident of California yet because you haven't been here long enough. Technically, the closest, he took them out of Nevada airport, so they weren't even abducted from California. They were abducted from Nevada. The custody orders were out of Colorado, and he had them in Florida. So it's literally a cross-country custody battle. So as soon as his 3-month legal visitation was up, I was on a plane, and I was there with my custody orders at the police station in Florida, and they were like, I'm sorry, this is a Colorado order. We can't enforce that here. And in the meantime, he had cut off all communication with the kids. So they're, 15, 14, and 13. And then all of a sudden they have zero contact with me whatsoever. He deleted all their Facebook accounts. I literally had no way to contact them except through his phone number, which of course he wouldn't let me speak to them. So that was kind of out. So as soon as the 3 months was over, I'm there in Florida trying to get them to enforce my custody order, which they couldn't do. So they were like, okay, maybe if you get some sort of emergency custody order, we might be able to do something with that. So I go back to Colorado, which is my home base. And, I had friends there, so, and I had friends there. So I thought, well, I'd be able to stay with somebody or something. So I got a complete cold shoulder from everybody. I mean, I went to the meeting while I was there trying to get this emergency custody order, and like nobody said anything to me. And I'm like, hi. And I get big fat crickets. And, I try to comment and nobody calls on me. And I'm like, what the heck? What the heck is going on? The ex was the soon to be third ex was in the English congregation, but it's a real small, super, super small community. And I went to the Spanish, not really thinking that perhaps he might have completely ruined my reputation, which he did. He had been there for about 6 months at that point, telling everybody that I was apostate, that I had invented everything against him. His father, who was a retired circuit overseer, worked through some loops and took his letter because you know how a letter follows you from congregation to congregation. He had taken the third ex-husband's letter and did some shady work. I don't know what he did, but passed it through 2 congregations in order to get it a clean letter, so that his new letter did not reflect that he had been deleted as an elder and a pioneer and publicly reproved for domestic violence. And so he's sitting here in this congregation telling everybody that I'm an apostate. And that to me was the most insane charge that you could possibly do, because I'm still completely brainwashed. I am completely sure that, Jehovah's not going to let my children be raised in the world. I've been faithful. I've been more than faithful. I'd given almost 20 years of full-time service, so how could this not work out right? So, okay, so pause that. because that was happening. At the same time, I'm trying to get this emergency custody order. So I get the emergency custody order. I go back to Florida. I give that to the police, and they're like, yeah, no, it's still not good enough. So I'm like, so then we start a custody war, this custody battle. And, of course, if you don't pay child support for 10 years, you've got some money so that you can afford an attorney. And the kids' dad could afford an attorney, and I couldn't. Honestly, I'm not, at that point, I wasn't really sure I really even needed an attorney, because how am I going to lose custody of my kids? I'm the mom. Hello, I'm their mom. This guy's only seen him twice in 10 years, and he's a deadbeat dad. How in the world is he ever going to get custody? So I attempted, and then I thought too, okay, so he's bringing up the religion thing. So obviously I'm going to have the congregation support, because anytime religion is brought up in a custody battle, there's supposed to be some sort of arrangement so that, the society, the organization steps in and helps defend our religious rights to raise our children, blah, blah, blah. So I'm in Colorado for the second time now, and I'm still getting complete crickets. And that's when I found out that he was telling everybody I was an apostate. So I went to the elders and I'm like, this is me. This is me. You've known me for 20 years. How is this? What do I do to clean my reputation? And you know what? They wouldn't speak with me for anything. I got stone faces like this. This is what they look like when I was meeting with them. No empathy, no love in their hearts whatsoever. Not a droplet of love in their hearts, not for me, not for my kids, not for any. I mean, there was no love there whatsoever. So now I had been hoping that I would have some sort of support, even if it's just a couch to crash on, or can I park my car in your driveway while I sleep in my car? And absolutely, I got absolutely nothing. So that was, I think, part of the first part of my waking up, because I'd had the experience before, but wait on Jehovah, everything's gonna be fine. Now this is push comes to shove. You know what? My kids' lives are on the line. My entire everything is on the line. Surely Jehovah's going to show up for me, right? You'd think so. So that year I ended up doing 7 cross-country trips for custody battles, from Florida to Colorado in custody battles. And by that time, the third husband had filed for divorce. So then I had divorce that I had to go through too. And I wanted to be as close to the kids as possible, because even though I wasn't seeing the kids, I was stalking the kids. I'd watch them in school. I did try to kidnap them once. That was a complete failure. But, I was there in case there was a moment that I could, in case they called, or in case for some reason he was going to let me have visitation. I wanted to be right there. So I had to do 7 cross-country trips that year, back and forth for the custody and back and forth for the divorce. And probably one of the biggest breaking points for me was during the divorce. So we have the initial hearing, which was, he had filed for divorce. So we're sitting in the courtroom, right? And he's crazy. I have this on recording. I think I'm going to upload it to YouTube, because he's crazy. He's talking about, he's trying to defend himself, and he's trying to defend how he left, and, there was coincidentally the business failed. I mean, he's just a complete liar. The judge saw through it 100%, and she awarded me with a nice fat alimony check. And of course that infuriated him. So he immediately tries to withdraw the divorce. So he hires an attorney and he tries to withdraw the divorce. And this is a legal court document that this man wrote. And in his attempt to withdraw, what he had said was, it has come to his awareness that this divorce could impact his relationship with Jehovah and his privileges in the congregation, and that he wasn't aware of that before. And because this has now been brought to his attention, he desires to reconcile with his wife and drop the divorce. And this is a legal document. And I started reading that, and I literally, I think I had a breakdown. I started laughing like the Joker, like this crazy, insane, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Trying to reconcile? No, you just don't want to pay alimony, that's all. And so I called the coordinator, the one that I had tried to clear my reputation with, and I read him this attempt to withdraw the divorce, which you can't do, by the way, but whatever. And I was like, do you not understand what a mockery of Jehovah this is? Do you not understand what an insanity this is? What a reproach, what a shame this is? And at the same time, I also let him know that this person also showed up as a witness in my custody battle, as a witness bashing my motherhood skills. So where's the whole, you're not supposed to go to court against your sister or brother or whatever. And you know what? I got dead silence on the line. And I think that was one of my first real snaps where I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. This is crazy. This is way beyond, Jehovah's going to take care of things in his own time. You guys are all nuts. You guys are, do you even hear yourselves? None of this makes any sense. And so that was a huge breaking point right then. And at that moment, I still wasn't deprogrammed that it wasn't the truth. I was still, I was still pretty brainwashed because I've not done any research against the organization. I had not done any sort of investigative thing. The only thing I was basing my opinions on was what was happening to me, my own personal experiences, personal things that I'd seen in the organization, but I didn't have any contrasting information from the outside to really start a deprogramming process yet. But that was one of the wake ups where I was like, okay. So I started by just thinking that maybe it was me. Maybe Jehovah just didn't want me. Maybe there was something, maybe my first divorce, maybe Jehovah never forgave me for that. Maybe that's why I've got all of this, consequences is what my family would call it. Well, if you'd have stayed with the first husband, none of this ever would have happened. Yeah, thanks a lot. That's super helpful, but not reality. And so I had a lot of that going on in my brain that, maybe Jehovah just didn't want me in the organization. Maybe he wanted me to learn humility. And so I ended up losing custody of the kids. He was granted full custody of the kids. And that was when I started my deprogramming, because as you can imagine, I went from here on top of the world to losing everything, my family, my friends, my babies. I didn't even know how to cook for one person. The amazing amount of time that you have available when you're not doing laundry for a family of 5. I had all kinds of free time, and I had no idea where to start creating a new life. But that's what I knew that I was going to have to do. I thought, you know what? Armageddon's going to come. I've got however many years I have left, and I'm going to make the best. I'm going to make the best of them. I'm going to thrive. I'm going to do the best that I possibly can do. At the time, I was thinking that partially I wanted to do it for the kids too, in case they ever decided that they wanted to find me or look for me or whatever. I knew that I needed to be emotionally stable. I needed to be financially stable. I needed to be happy, because I thought, if they ever come knocking, they can't find me as, like some balled up wreck crying in a couch in misery. I mean, I need to have my shit together if they ever decide they want to come back. So that's when I started my deprogramming. So thank the universe that I had already had those NLP coaching skills, and thank the universe that I had already helped deprogram religion before. In the past, it had been with Mormons, but now I have me as a client. So I started going through all of the beliefs, and objectively looking at them to decide whether they were healthy or not. And there's a lot of beliefs that have to be deprogrammed. Right from the very beginning, start from the very beginning, you're a born sinner. You're never going to be good enough unless you repent, accept Jesus as a savior, and even then you're never worthy. This is undeserved loving kindness. Oh, and then there's my favorite scripture, which is, probably maybe if you'll be concealed in the day of destruction. So all of those things, when I started looking at that from a coaching viewpoint, and I started analyzing it, and I started realizing, wait a second, that is a horribly limiting, damaging belief. I remember when I had done the NLP coaching before, and when the elders had accused me of being demonic, at the time, I remember defending this practice, this healing tool, by saying, this is how Jehovah's going to bring us to perfection in the future, because this tool heals, and it really does open up the mind so that you can accept what's really the truth instead of what you've been ingrained and conditioned because of imperfection to feel like the truth is. So those were some of the beliefs that I started with. Ransom sacrifice, being born a sinner, from a completely logical parental standpoint, does it make any sense that a loving father would say such things, would allow you to believe that? I mean, I would never want my child to think that they're never going to be worthy or never good enough, or no matter what they do, probably maybe I might love them. I mean, when I started looking at it from that objective kind of coaching more standpoint, I started realizing, wait a second, there's a whole lot of stuff here that's not right. And then even on the feminist side too, I mean, growing up as a woman in the organization, we were limited doesn't even start to cover it. I mean, you're not even this big. I mean, God's creations are above a woman in the organization. So I start analyzing those kind of beliefs and structures, and that really helped me get my head on straight, because instead of feeling like I didn't, because what happens when you leave is you have this set of beliefs that you believe with all your heart. Then you get disfellowshipped, or you leave. I think a lot of people probably get disfellowshipped because of some sort of sin or whatever. But you take that set of beliefs and you move it with you to the outside of the organization life. And that doesn't work, because it barely works in the organization. So if you try to take this and move it here, you're in trouble, because you can't fit. That is a dysfunctional, false belief system that limits you. I mean, there's money beliefs. I mean, the whole Armageddon's coming any day. Don't bother saving money. Don't bother buying a house. Don't bother doing retirement accounts. So you come out of the organization and you have a lot of time to make up for, not just in your education, but financially, your self-esteem. I mean, now all of a sudden your whole world has been destroyed, which can actually be a good thing, because, you might have a beautiful piece of beachfront land, but if it has a house on it from 1930, you need to wipe it out in order to really create something beautiful out of a prime piece of real estate, So my career when I got out was real estate. So it's kind of like that when you leave the religion. You have to wipe it clean. If you can't hang on to, what if it's the truth, or, what if Armageddon really is? No, that needs to be wiped from an emotional root. It has to be eradicated to where it is so neutralized that it doesn't even affect you anymore, because those beliefs are so ingrained. It will affect every financial decision, every job decision, every decision you make with your life is going to be based on that religion, unless you go on a serious anti-brainwashing campaign to make sure all of that stuff gets wiped out. So that's what I did with myself. I had a house that I was living in. I had some alimony coming in, so I didn't have to worry too much about, a job yet. And I knew that I had to dedicate that time to myself to get my head on straight, because wiping the books is one thing, but then you have to build something on your new foundation, because, you can rip out all of these beliefs, but if you don't plant something helpful in to take its place, you're just going to flounder. I mean, you're not going to, there is so much that has to be deprogrammed. I mean, our view of how we trust worldly people, how we view sex, how we view dating, friendships, holidays, plant medicine. I mean, all of this stuff, we've got some massive, not just wiping out the old stuff, but allowing space for a new life to flourish. And so that's what I dedicated myself to, was rebuilding a new me, because the old me was destroyed. There was no old me. I had nothing left.
Wow, that's really interesting that you were able to do the deprogramming on your own, without having to do all this research. That's how a lot of people wake up. It's by doing the research and being faced with everything wrong with the organization. Yeah. You had to go through that yourself. Yeah.
I've already seen these glaring flares, but you still have this baseline of beliefs, and you've got, if you're going to thrive, if you're going to thrive outside, you've got to clean house, man. And it's not just getting rid of the old beliefs. It's giving yourself empowering beliefs about what you deserve, about what kind of life you deserve, about what kind of income you deserve, about what you're capable of. Because, I was homeschooled. I had no higher education. Now I'm living in Ecuador, and I think that that's a great possibility. Education is very inexpensive here. I can finally pursue a degree if I wanted to for myself. But, sometimes when we come out of the religion, we have this weight on us, like, I have no experience, I have no education, all I've done is housekeeping and window cleaning and construction, because that's what Jehovah's Witnesses do. Those are the jobs. Not that there's anything wrong with those jobs, but sometimes those jobs come with income limitations, growth limitations. And maybe that's just not what you want to do. Maybe that's not your gift, and you're not allowed to think that if you're in. So in order to thrive on the outside, you have to find your passion and give yourself permission to embrace that, and to grow the divine given gifts that you have, and feel empowered to do so. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of digging deep. It takes a lot of willing to look at the skeletons in the closet. It takes a lot of being willing to cry. It takes a lot of willing to let go. I miss my family as much, if not more, than any of the rest of you do. But this is a new chapter, and everybody makes their own choices. They've made their choices, and I love them for that. I love that we do have free will. And if that's the religion that they choose to stay in, then literally God bless them, because I want them to be happy. And if that's what makes them happy, then that's good. I'm happy to say that about 4 years ago now, my brother left, so I have a brother now.
Wow. So what about your kids? Were they raised as witnesses? Are they still in the organization, or were they able to get out?
So I raised them up until the time I lost custody, and their dad is not a witness. So no, I had hoped that as they each reached 18, that they might reach out or something. Since I deprogrammed myself as soon as I lost them, I immediately would, try to find them on Facebook. I'd find them for a second. That account would get deleted. So I always tried to say happy birthday or Merry Christmas or whatever, since, I didn't always have communication, but I made the best attempts that I could. And as the oldest one turned 18, she didn't want to have anything to do with me. My middle son turned 18. He didn't want to have anything to do with me. Once they hit 18, their social media accounts, I was able to stalk a little bit easier. I assume that it was prior to 18. Their dad probably was controlling a lot of that. I've tried with the oldest two, and I was able to reconnect with my youngest son at when he turned 18, and he was pretty livid. He was pretty furious, and the first words out of his mouth was, very hateful, because his opinion, what he had been told, was basically in effect that I abandoned them and that I did not want them, which obviously was not the truth. But I was not able to defend that by being a participating parent. That's called parental alienation. It's probably one of the most damaging things that you could do to your children. I did not do that to my kids through the whole time I'd been divorced from their dad. I never bashed him and said he was a horrible human. I mean, I never did that, but apparently he doesn't have those rules. And so he did a really good job of completely trashing me to my children. And it's sad in a lot of ways. Well, it's very sad in all ways, because children shouldn't have to lose their mother. They shouldn't have to be thinking that their mother abandoned them and that their mother didn't want them. That's a lie, and lies hurt, and my kids are hurt. So maybe at some point the two older ones will come back. I'm reworking a relationship with my youngest son, which has been one of my coaching challenges, because bless his heart, he's got a lot of trauma, and it's rightfully earned, because what they went through was no easier than what I went through. And they did it without their mother. So the two older children, I believe in my heart that everyone has the right to choose their life, even if that means that the decision is painful for me. As long as that's a decision that they're comfortable with, then may they be blessed with their decision. Maybe they be happy with that decision in their heart, because all I want is the best for them. Even if it hurts me, that's okay. If that's what keeps them safe and happy, then that's the right decision for them. So I'm building a relationship with my son. My youngest son, he's a Marine. He's stationed in Japan. So I haven't seen him. I've invited him here to Ecuador. So he's got plans to come visit when he's able to, when he's not in Japan anymore. So after I did my deprogramming, I had to recreate a life. So I went into real estate sales, and that was, Jehovah's Witnesses are great at sales. If you need a career tip, definitely get into sales. We're taught conversation stoppers. We're taught all kinds of good things. They're super useful in sales. So I met my husband, my fourth and final husband. I met him shortly after my deprogramming sessions with myself, and he says, what are your plans? And I said, I'm going to sell real estate. And he says, all right, let's do it. So that's what we did. We worked super hard for 7 years. I had told him when we met that I wanted to live outside of the country. I loved living in the Dominican Republic. I loved it. And I wanted to do that again, not to mention the fact I'll never be able to retire in America because I can't afford it. I don't have 401ks and, investments. I literally had to start from $0 at 38, no advanced education or anything else that I might be able to turn to other than my wits. So that's what we did. We worked super hard, saved money. And 2 years ago, we bought 40 acres in Ecuador, and we started building here in Ecuador. We built a farm. So right now we have a completely organic farm. I'm on the edge of the Amazon on a preserve that has thousands and thousands of acres. So the land that we bought is probably some of the purest that's left in the world, probably. There's no chemicals or pesticides or anything has ever touched my land. It's been cow pasture. In fact, that's what it looked like when I bought it. Now it has a house on it. So one of our purposes in building here was we wanted to have a healing retreat, a healing center where we could focus on this new life. We could focus on the healing, because while I was really good at real estate, part of the reason why I was really good at real estate is because I'm really good with people and I love people, and I've been a healer all along. So I always knew that sales career, which is fairly stressful, was going to have a time limit, and that what we wanted to do was be able to retire in a comfortable place where we could do what we love, which is basically live in paradise without having to wait for Armageddon.
Yep, she's won the contest here. You can leave the organization and still end up in paradise. You don't have to wait for Armageddon either. You don't have to wait for Armageddon. She's there already.
No cleaning up dead bodies. No, watching all the carnage.
So
you can just have your mountain.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Wow, that's. I mean, for one thing, it just shows how powerful that NLP process is. That you can both heal yourself and deprogram yourself from the witnesses, while simultaneously also dealing with.
I don't know how
your kids' relationship.
I don't know how I would have survived without it. It was so traumatic because you know what? I didn't leave. I got accused of being apostate, treated like an apostate when I actually hadn't done anything. So that's fairly messed up. That's super messed up. It's not like, oh, I sinned, I'm disfellowshipped, I deserve this. This was like, what the heck? What the heck? Yeah. I'm trying to stay in. So the deprogramming from that was super traumatic. I mean, that was super, super traumatic. Plus, then there's the loss of the kids too, which I guess it was kind of related to the religion in the sense that, the kids' stepdad used the religion as part of the reasons why I shouldn't have custody, and then the workings of the organization, man, that's just, you can't work with crazy. You can't play by the rules when the rules are crazy, and the rules change depending on how much money you have, how much position you have, who gets to talk to who first. Oh, I was here first and I got to talk. And so, there is no fair playing ground, and through that whole experience too, especially when I was doing the back and forth and, I was trying to clear my reputation or anything. One of the other major things that really kicked me in the gut too was there was a couple that I was pretty close to, and they were missionaries. They were kind of like retired missionaries, but they had said, we haven't seen your husband. Is everything okay? And so I was like, he got deleted as an elder because of domestic violence. And, I started crying, and immediately the husband was like, stop. We can't talk about this because you'll get into trouble for gossip and slander. You can't say anything. No, we can't hear. We love you. We're here to support you. And I found that several times. I mean, as soon as I reached out for any sort of friendship, emotional support, anything, it was, we don't want to gossip. We don't want to actually talk about anything because God forbid, I'll get in trouble for it. That is so messed up. That is hugely messed up.
Yeah, and it's something that happens, and again, just like everything else, it doesn't get talked about enough. You know, that here's these women who are going through these environments, stuck in these toxic marriages, and when they go to ask for help,
there is none.
They get nothing.
There is none. And the people that you're supposed to turn to, they have no training. They have no psychology training. They have no words of wisdom. I mean, you literally get nothing but maybe a prayer, and probably a boring one at that. I mean, what is that? How is that useful in any way, shape, or form? You know?
Yeah.
And so that's the world that we came out of. And so learning how to live in this new world is beautiful, but you need to be prepared for it, because you can thrive outside. I mean, if there's anybody who's a witness that can say it's possible, it's me. I came from as deep in as you get. I mean, I had to restart life from a freaking backpack and living off of my wits. And I did it. Just reach out for help, because chances of somebody being able to do it alone is pretty low.
Yes, yeah, and definitely go through the process like she did, of deprogramming yourself, asking yourself the hard questions, facing all your beliefs, shining a light on it, and see if there's any shadow aspects there that need to be removed. That's what that XJW recovery book is all about for you guys. You know, that's all those journaling exercises through all those different categories, the sexual trauma, the finances, the belief systems. It's all there to help you do that process that she was talking about, of having to face these things and say, does this make sense or does it not? And 9 times out of 10, when you go through the process of writing it down, shining that light on the shadow, it does not make any sense, and it was not for your benefit.
You know, and then the extra step to that too is finding out what we do believe, because it can be an easier process to realize what we don't believe. But if you don't replace it with something, you end up with a vacuum hole. And that causes confusion. It causes anger. It causes fear. It causes you to be stuck. Because at least when you have a belief system, even if it's a false religion, at least you have a belief system. You know what you believe, you know it to be true, and okay, it's fake, but that's beside the point. At least you believe it. When you come out, you are in a state of confusion, because now you don't know what to believe. You know that you don't believe this, but what do you replace it with? Because anytime there's a void, it's going to be filled with something. You have to replace it. And so, you know, on a spiritual level, there's, you know, so now we're out here and we're like, okay, now what am I? I'm not a Jehovah's Witness. What am I? Am I Catholic? Am I atheist? You know, there's this another process that you go through is you're trying to figure out, what do I believe and where do I fit into this world? And that's a pretty powerful subject too. So I'll kind of go off on a little bit of my spiritual journey. Is that okay? So after I left, I'm with my husband and we're doing real estate, and I went atheist because, you know, as I said, you have to figure out what your beliefs are after. And so the belief that I went into was nothing. There's no God. There's no, you know, religion's all a snare and a racket, you know, so I didn't believe in anything. And I think I was like that for probably about 3.5 to 4 years. And then one night I was reading a book on psychology. I'd always kept up on my NLP training and books on psychology and self-help and everything. And I want to make this very clear. I was not drinking. I was completely sober. I was snuggled up on the couch and I was reading a book. And all of a sudden I felt this warm presence. And I had a visual of a spirit. And this spirit was my uncle. And my uncle had shunned me super hard. And he'd been an elder my whole life. He was one of the ones that stepped down in order to get me reinstated. And then he'd gone back to serving as an elder after that. And he had no children. My uncle had no kids. And so I was his favorite, and he was my favorite. He was my, shunning him was really, or him shunning me was, shunning is all hard, but that was really hard. So here I am reading this book, and then all of a sudden I feel his presence, and I see him, you know, in this like a apparition, a ghost, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, you know, obviously I don't believe in any of this. You know, I don't believe in a soul. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in anything. And this is my uncle. And he says, honey, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. My uncle was also born into the religion. You know, he was 4th generation, so this is his spiritual heritage too. He says, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing, and I was wrong, and please forgive me. And he started crying, and I started crying, and it was the weirdest. I'd never, obviously, ever had any sort of experience like that. You know, I wasn't looking for any sort of spiritual experience. I wasn't wondering what happens after death. I mean, I was not there at all. This is completely out of the blue. And so it ended by this complete sense of calm, this complete sense of peace. And he just said, honey, I'm always here. Whatever you need, I'm always here. And so that shook me. And obviously nobody's speaking to me. So I find out on Facebook like 3 days later that he had died. And so that kind of put me back on another spiritual path, that what the heck was that? Because I didn't know that he'd passed away. And clearly that was something. So, and a very emotional, very intense something that had relevant content to what was happening. And so that kind of put me back on this, wait a second, maybe it's not all total bullshit. Maybe that path of healing, maybe that path of connectedness, that path to the source, you know, soul, feelings, that the energy of a body, maybe there is something to what happens when you die, what happens to your energy. You know, how is it that I was able to have such an intense spiritual experience? And so that kind of started me on a journey into another dimension. That kind of started me onto this other journey of, okay, so that's a lie. Atheism is also not completely true, because from this experience that I just saw, obviously there is something else. There's something else out there. There is a greater force beyond us. And I think that's when I really started tapping into intuition, my natural gifts as a healer. And it was soon after that I really started researching a lot of plant medicines, because obviously growing up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, my dad did not have health insurance, so we hardly ever went to the doctor. And so they would kind of want to fall back on, natural remedies and healing, self kind of healing, organic, healthy lifestyles, that kind of stuff. So that kind of was the direction that I started taking to try to find answers. And so through that journey is kind of how it kind of led us here to Ecuador, because Ecuador is the home to amazing plants. I mean, medicinal plants that are being lost, honestly, because of, an industrialized lifestyle. But, the herbs and the plants that are here are phenomenal. For example, there's a plant here. It's called Guayusa. It's got caffeine in it. It's got, I think it's 10 or 15 times more antioxidants than green tea. It has caffeine in it, but it also contains a molecule that slow releases the caffeine. So your caffeine lasts about 8 hours, and it goes nice and slow and steady. And this place is full of amazing plants that you've never heard of anywhere else. And they're, they are miraculous. So I dived into herbs, studying plant medicine. The Amazon is the home of wonderful things that are completely forbidden in JW.
So before we go too much into that, let me give a disclaimer for the witnesses out there that are just getting out, because we've already gone, just in the past 5 minutes of this conversation, we've already gone off the map a little bit. She was atheist. She now has had this direct experience with something that has now put her back on a path where she's like, okay, what is this then? And a lot of times for people that are leaving the witnesses, there seems to be two paths. Either you go hard Christianity, in which some of this stuff is still off the map and still considered, well, if it's not from God, then it's demonic.
Right.
Or there's the path of strict atheist, where there's just nothing. There's the physical, and that is it. And again, a lot of the stuff may seem woo-woo. Some of you people out there may have already kind of, by this point said, can't believe it. But
She's
I
crazy.
encourage you, keep an open mind, because there are things that can happen that are off the map. Okay, there are things that can happen that are off the map that are a direct experience of something that was not taught to us as Jehovah's Witnesses. So what we're about to go into right now, well,
I will just
very
add
much forbidden. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to add too that if I ever heard somebody say what I just said, I would be like, that's crazy, that's insane, she's smoking something or she's doing something, because that's wacko. I am on your team. I was hardcore, man.
Yeah.
You know what? That was completely unexpected. That was completely unexpected. And I felt like I should share that, because coming from such a hardcore stance, I mean, you're talking the governing body taught my first pioneer school. I don't know you can get anybody more brainwashed than I was. And if I had been looking or trying to create some sort of experience, I'd be the first to try to infuse those and say, oh, what kind of movies was she watching or something like that, but that was not what that was about. And so I felt like I should share that, because that's part of life on the other side. We were told all kinds of things were demonic, deadly, all worldly men are going to rape you, it's so black and white. It is so dogmatic. And the truth is, it's not. Life, in order to thrive on the outside, doesn't have those restrictions and boundaries and rules that I grew up with, that my personality got formed by,
Mm-hmm.
So coming out, there's a whole new box of experiences that are not what we thought they are. Hey, you know what? Apostates is a great one. Do you know I spent my entire life terrified of apostates? You don't want to talk to them. God forbid you should research anything. And then all of a sudden you start on this journey of knowledge to try to discover things. And then all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a second. You know what? Maybe these apostates, actually, maybe they're just actually thinking. Maybe they do know something, and then you start discovering. And then all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a second. What we thought was black and white isn't even in the color chart, man. I mean, and so that's kind of where my journey picked up its second half, because I came, obviously, I mean, plant medicines, and even things like, valerian root, or, some St. John's wort, all these kind of things, they're okay. They're acceptable. They're acceptable. Alcohol is 100% go. And that's highly toxic. I mean, that does bodily damage. That does brain damage. That does relationship damage. Not that I'm anti-alcohol. I'm just saying that as a Jehovah's Witness, that's completely a thumbs up and that's okay. Whereas other things are completely forbidden, like magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, cannabis. I don't know how much they've changed on that over the years, but when I was growing up, that is as horrible taboo as you could possibly get, right? However, in my journey, I've discovered that just like I used to think something like an apostate was completely dangerous, deadly even, some of these other things that we've been conditioned to think are horrible, toxic, dangerous, deadly, are actually very powerful healing tools to connect us with our inner self, to connect us to source, to help us heal on levels that aren't easily accessible or very easily possible without gifts from the universe that are safe. They're completely safe.
Yeah. So why don't you explain what you guys do there? Of course, you do the NLP, but as far as the plant medicine aspect, can you? Because again, all of these substances were considered forbidden, were considered bad. They open you up to demons, is what they told us. Not to mention, even outside of religion, just on a government standpoint, they have demonized these substances.
Right.
Although now, that's a whole nother subject, but now they are being studied by a lot of colleges and stuff, and they're showing magnificent benefits.
Yep.
But regardless of that, can you just explain for someone that's just getting out of the witnesses, that has never heard of this stuff, their only opinion on it, if they have heard of it, is that it's bad. Can you explain why someone would fly all the way down to Ecuador, and you've had people who are highly professionals, people you wouldn't believe would be flying down there, and they come to you and they take these substances for healing purposes.
Right.
So can you explain why that is?
First of all, I think that a lot of these substances have had a bad rap because they have not been done in therapeutic sessions. I'm not talking about, combining alcohol and loud music and partying. That's how all this stuff got kind of controlled in the beginning. I think that religion demonizes these kind of plants because they want to be the only pathway to spirituality. It's a control thing. The more they can control that and keep you from thinking and keep you from feeling, the more they keep you under your thumb. That's why they are demonized. These plants first of all, it's a plant. So even if you do want to talk about demons, I don't know how they draw the correlation between a demon and a plant that grows in the dirt, just like all of these other plants do. One of the primary ones that I work with is psilocybin. Psilocybin is a gift from the universe. It enables you to connect to the source. It provides an opening for the most profound spiritual experiences that are life-changing for people. I mean, I myself in the religion, I can count on 2 fingers the great spiritual feelings that I had while I was in the religion. And those don't hold a candle to what a simple plant that is natural, that has been growing on our planet for thousands of years, what those can open up for you is a spiritual experience, a wholeness. It gives you a completed whole feeling that you can't get on antidepressants or painkillers, or prescription meds aren't going to do that for you. They're not made to do that for you. Whereas these plants, in my experience, in my opinion, they were put here for us to connect to source or the universe or whatever you want to call it. Religion didn't do that for me. And I know a lot of people that not only did it not give them that spiritual connection, it gave them trauma. And plants have the ability to connect us to a higher power, a higher source that you can't get any other way that I've seen. The coaching makes a huge difference. So usually what I do with people is we'll do a coaching for, depending on the person, anywhere from 3 to 6 months, kind of fleshing out some of the basics. That way, when they're ready for an experience, they've got a lot of the dust and the cobwebs out of the way, and they can really embrace the spirituality that they've never experienced before. And these kind of medicines, these kind of plant medicines that I'm talking about, psilocybin's the main one that I work with here, but we also use San Pedro and ayahuasca. These are not addictive. There's no side effects. There's literally no side effects. So when somebody is ready for a treatment like this, the setting is super important. So I don't believe you can have the same experience if you just go buy a bag of mushrooms and try it on your own, because it's a very intense experience. And there's a process that we go through before the plant ceremony. I am there to guide through the entire process, between the entire trip, the entire voyage, this entire journey. I'm there to make sure that the person stays grounded, to make sure that there's nothing that they can't handle. These plant medicines, I always tell people there's no such thing as a bad trip. I've guided hundreds literally, and there has never been a bad one. When somebody has an intense experience, it's usually just because, and like I tell them, this plant is not giving you anything that you don't already have inside. So the reason why the voyage might be really intense is because you've got some really intense shit that you're dealing with on the inside. This is just giving you a safe place to let it out, to heal, and to reconnect with source, with energy, with yourself in a therapeutic session, which is really hard to duplicate on your own.
Yes. And again, I know that talking about these things seems so woo-woo, so out there to especially when you're leaving a high control religious group like the Witnesses. I will say for myself, and this was something that when I first started this channel, I said I will never talk about this on this channel, just because I know how people are.
Yeah.
I'm going to break that rule today. So I've had people ask me since the beginning of starting XJW Diaries, how are you so calm about talking about this stuff? How are you so forgiving? What did you do? I can tell you did a lot of healing. What did you do? And yes, it was a lot of research. Yes, it was a lot of counseling. There's a lot of aspects to it. But I will tell you one thing. When I left the Witnesses, I was against everything.
I was too. Hardcore.
I mean, even alcohol to some extent. I was against everything.
Yeah, me too.
Like
hardcore.
Yeah. So, and like I said at the very beginning of when I introduced the XJW recovery book, I had that night where I felt like I was broken. And that's how I felt for a long time there. I felt like I was just completely broken. Like this organization had broken me. Right. And I was 27 years old. And I felt like I had no time to be broken at that age.
Right.
And so I was doing all this research, trying to find anything that was going to get me fixed as fast as possible. And through that research, I found some of the plant medicines that she's talking about. I had my own experience with psilocybin, aka magic mushrooms, if you want to call it that. And I will tell you, complete honesty here, that experience lasted me 6 hours. And in those 6 hours, I did what felt like 60 years, not 16, 60, 60. Yes. And again, I was only 27. So imagine, how can you do so much healing that it feels like you've done more healing than your entire lifetime? That was my experience. It has changed me from the root of myself to make me into who I am today. And then I've had another experience after that, and that was that. Well, let's go into that. Let's talk about it. I see it's getting late there, and it's getting cold. So I don't want to keep on too long, but we can do another video later. But I do want to talk about, if you do your own research on these things, which I encourage you to do your own research. one of the things that you will find is that people have very intense experiences on these substances. You can take somebody who is atheist, and by the time that experience is over, they will not be atheist. You can take someone who has been addicted to hardcore drugs, heroin, things like that. They have been to rehab over and over again. They still can't kick it. They do this one time, once, and they never touch it again. One time. So this is how powerful these things are. You can take people who are Christian, Buddhist, from many other, any sort of faith that you can think of. They try it. They have a direct experience. Whereas in a lot of these religions, especially the witnesses, you don't have a direct experience. You never have a direct spiritual experience. It's all about you reading it. You know, when you read in Exodus about, it wasn't Exodus, I forget what, it's been a while. But whatever book that was, where Moses, you know, is in the wilderness, he comes upon that burning bush. When you're reading that, you are creating a mental image in your head based on the English words that you're reading from this book. It's a second-hand experience with these things. And again, it's hard to describe, and it's not for everybody. I'll say that it's not for everybody, especially if you have very intense mental illness that runs in your family. It may not be a good thing for you. But with these substances, it's not reading these things. My spiritual beliefs have evolved based off of a direct experience, not what I read, a direct experience. You can have people from many different faiths. They try this, they have a direct experience, and they're all saying the same thing.
Yep.
So you talk about that.
All the research. Do all the research. I mean, you will see it literally increases neuroplasticity. It literally helps you rewire the left-right brain connection so that your brain is firing in unison. And the experiences that you have are, like you said, they're so profoundly intense that it's what we wished for when we were in the organization, when it's what we hoped we were going to find and we didn't. And it's because that's not the path. That's not the, it's funny. In some of my research, I was reading that the island of Patmos, where the Apostle John was exiled to when he wrote the book of Revelation, is one of the most, it's famous for its magic mushrooms there. But anyway, that aside.
And they say that the burning bush that Moses came upon was acacia. And you know what chemical gets released when acacia wood burns? DMT, which just happens to be the most powerful substance that's out there that we know of. So of course you're gonna have something happen. Yeah,
I mean the likelihood of, so even if you're going to try to reconcile the Bible and plant medicines, the likelihood of all of these Bible writers never having tried a mushroom, because there was no organization that told them not to. 10 Commandments, all of the Levitical law, none of it said don't eat mushrooms. And they're following a whole lot of cattle and sheep. So, I mean, it's not totally far off to think that, perhaps the prohibition has been in recent years because of the control that religion wants to exercise over people. It has nothing to do with demons or anything like that. So as you're going on your journey of leaving, as you're going on your journey of growth, the one thing I'd want to plant in your mind is be willing to question not just the doctrinal things, but other things that were forbidden and why. Because I believe that these plant medicines are what connect us to our spiritual side. I've seen healings with these from everything, from abuse traumas to religious traumas to panic attacks to drug addictions, drug and alcohol addictions. I mean, like you mentioned, one session, that is all it takes to rewire and give yourself a new platform to operate off of, with a whole new, your eyes open to all of the potentials that are here, using all of the gifts that the universe has on this planet.
Absolutely. And again, this is some stuff that you just can't quite get it unless you have had that experience. I know when I was doing the research, there was things that they would talk about, and I just didn't quite get it until I had that experience. And there's certain things.
It's indescribable.
Yeah, exactly. There's no language at all that we have had, that we have now, nor that we have had in the past that can contain that experience. But yeah, that's a longer conversation that, I mean, if you'd be willing to, I'd love to do a separate video just about NLP and plant medicines and just healing in general.
Tangents on those.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So before we end this, it's getting dark out there. The sun is already set.
Just one thing. Oh, yeah. Anybody who's interested in any sort of plant medicines and stuff like that, don't take it lightly. You know, it's not something that you want to do, you know, on a binge party weekend or something like that. It's definitely in a medicinal category. We're not talking recreational, you know, wahoo stuff right here. I mean, this is meditating. This is setting intent. This is making sure that the beginning of the process is really set up well so that the plant medicines can work with your intentions of healing. And then I do an integration process afterwards too, because like you said, it easily takes 6 to 8 hours, depending on the doses and depending on the person. So after that, now we need to integrate everything. We need to make sure that whatever you've learned, whatever you've discovered, whatever you've felt, we talk about and we integrate it so that you're not just like, you know, like left hanging or something like that. So that's just kind of my disclaimer that I'm not telling everybody to go out there and eat a bunch of shrooms this weekend. Don't do that.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. And yeah, and you know, the rule, the rule for taking these substances is often set and setting. Your mindset and the setting that you're in, because your brain is going to work on a different level while you're on these things, and your mindset and your setting, your environment makes a humongous difference in the experience. So you can imagine where Dena's at out there in Ecuador. She's got, you know, the nice forest, you know, backdrop behind her. And she's already going to take you through the NLP and everything before you even take the substance. So that's a perfect example of set and setting. So the last question I have for you is, what advice would you have for people who are currently waking up, people who are currently just beginning to ask questions about the religion? What advice would you have for them?
Probably the first recommendation is read Crisis of Conscience, because that was written by a man who truly loved God, and he saw something in the organization that hurt his heart. And that is one of the most forbidden books, I think, and it's probably one of the ones that you should read the first, because that cracks open the nutshell of, wait a second, this is not the truth. And that's probably one of the first things we have to start unbrainwashing the brainwashing is their authority over our lives. Because whether you're in a position where you have your own doubts and you're just starting to research, that will help. Some people, there's a lot of people that get kicked out, they get disfellowshipped. You need to read that book too, because they have no authority unless you give it to them. So the whole reason that you've been disfellowshipped, that will help start reprogramming your mind as to the abuse of power that you're undergoing right now. If you're unsure and you're just barely starting to question or you're wondering, my heart feels for you. Because I believed in this religion with my whole heart, my whole life. And everything I believed was a lie. Everything I believed was a lie. Life outside is beautiful. Well, now it's dark, but normally it's beautiful. And it is nothing like what they told you. I was told that, you know, I'd fall on my face, the world will eat you up, you know, the world is full of vile, evil people. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. That is a lie. And so as you're doing your research, and as you're starting down this journey, please question everything. Everything. Because if one thing's a lie, then that's great. You found one piece of proof. But once you start realizing that everything is a lie, now all of a sudden you're a whole lot more free than you ever could have imagined. Not only is your body free, but your heart is free, because your heart's not hurting that they're hurting you, or should I go back, or no, there's none of that, because your heart and soul and mind is what needs to be free. You know, when you're disfellowshipped, and when you're disfellowshipped, I think your body is free, but your heart and mind may not be, because you still might be justifying that, oh, I did this, so that's why I'm God's fellowshipped, or, you know, or I want to go back because I want my family back. And I get that. I've been there. I've been there. And that's not the best choice for a full life, because you weren't living a full life in. So going back's not the answer. You know, the path is forward through the pain, you know, and on the other side of the pain it's paradise. It's wonderful. It's free. It's beautiful. You can thrive out here, and question everything. That's how you get here.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming on. Great advice. Question everything, go through the path, and you can have your paradise now.
Yep.
So, thank you so much.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed that interview. Thanks again. Big thanks to Dena for sticking around, even though it was getting dark outside, and going through that interview, sharing your stories, very intimate details, but still being open and vulnerable to share them with the hope of helping others. And I definitely look forward to you coming back on to continue that talk that we were having towards the end about plant medicines and the NLP and all those different ways of being able to help people to heal and recover and gain their power back after leaving a high control group. Thank you to all of you who are watching. Thank you for your time. Stay tuned. I have another interview that's coming up, this time with a couple who together went through very similar circumstances growing up in the witnesses. So that's a pretty interesting one. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, take it easy on yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.